Hey Pretty Girl Club, welcome back to the Privilege Stacking series, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to build your pedestal with feminine privilege. So the first thing you want to think about is a pedestal. What exactly is a pedestal? Because most of the time when I see women complaining on YouTube about not having a pedestal, that just means compliments. It means social status. It means having access to exclusive spaces and exclusive opportunities. So the first thing you can do is take out your journal, and I want you to start writing down like what exact scenarios do you consider to be a pedestal? So I will use myself as an example. So what I consider to be a pedestal is like if I have access to modeling opportunities. That's an example. Only I think 1 or 2% of the population can do professional modeling. So anything that is considered rare, anything that is considered kind of like a prize in this society, anything that gives me a form of exclusivity or social status, I consider that to be a pedestal for myself. So pedestals are not a monolith. Some women think that a pedestal means that you get to stay at home, like you don't have to work a 9 to 5 job. And, that's a part of my definition of a pedestal for myself. So there are all kinds of pedestals that you can actually gain access to. So that's the fun part about femininity. That's the fun part about building your pedestal. You get to spend your free time curating your own unique signature form of social status for yourself. A lot of women, they talk about the soft life, but then they never describe what exactly the soft life is. Like, what is the soft life? None of them ever say what it is. In their minds, like in a lot of women's minds, the soft life is having a man or it's like being married. And I feel like even that phrase, the soft life, that's not a monolith either. So what is it that makes you feel soft? What kind of lifestyle, what kind of financial status, what kind of geographical location makes you feel like you're on a pedestal and living the soft life? Is it living in the suburbs? Is it living on the water? Is it having certain items, like maybe having a nice car, maybe having access to like a boat or something? I don't know, having your own yacht? Whatever it is, you want to start to like write that down, because I do actually believe in the general concept of manifestation. I'm not like a spiritual type of person, but I do believe in the science behind that, where if you spend your time focusing on something, you are more likely to manifest that thing in real life. So that's why writing down what a pedestal means to you, that's going to help you to build it. So for me, a pedestal is having as many privileges as possible. So that could be pretty privilege, thin privilege. It could be the privilege of living in my dream city. It could be the privilege of having good friends, surrounding myself with people who love me versus being around toxic people. So that's step one, is you want to know exactly what goal you're shooting for. If you had perfect femininity and perfect beauty and a perfect bank account tomorrow, how would your life change? What kind of lifestyle would you live? And if you're still having a hard time understanding what a pedestal is, you can do this. Think of the most pedestalized woman that you've ever met or that you've ever come across. Just think of her. Who is she? Is it a family member of yours? Is it a celebrity? Is it a certain movie star or something? Why do you think she has a pedestal? What is it about her that's special? And how can you create those qualities in your own life? Actually, I just had an epiphany right there. A pedestal is built on the qualities that make you special. There's something special about that person. That's why she has the pedestal. So her beauty makes her special. That's why she's the pretty girl at school. Her intelligence made her special. That's why she got into the Ivy League. So I want you to start thinking about the qualities that make you special. And if you don't feel like you have any qualities, I want you to start thinking about how you can cultivate more qualities that make you special. Like on this channel, we talk a lot about multiculturalism, and that's because I believe multiculturalism is something that can make you special. It really is, because you can interact with people from different backgrounds. I think monoculturalism makes you special within your particular culture. So one's not better than the other, but you get to decide where you want to be treated as special. Because being special means that there's something about you that stands out. There's something that is slightly different about you. And so that's what's giving you a spotlight. Having a special quality about yourself is what gives you the spotlight. So you can start thinking like, okay, what areas of life have given me the spotlight in the past? That is my pedestal. So is it my athletic abilities? Maybe I was on the basketball team. Maybe I'm really good at running. Maybe I'm really good at debating. Maybe I have some sort of talent. I can sing. I can dance. Those are examples of things that build a pedestal because those are special qualities about you. Those are special things that other people do not have. A part of having a pedestal has to do with exclusivity. Like you have these exclusive qualities or you have a certain appearance that most women don't have. That's why thin privilege, I consider that to be a pedestal because if the average size of a woman in the US is a size 16 to 18, but you're a size 10, well, you're naturally standing out a little bit right there because you have a quote unquote special quality. Whenever someone is talking about not having a pedestal or not feeling special, what they're really saying is that they feel average, meaning they blend in. They walk into a room, they blend in with every other woman. They walk into a crowd, they blend in. They don't stand out. So the pedestal concept is about standing out. So that's step one, is to know exactly what kind of pedestal you want, what you want to build your pedestal based on. For example, this YouTube channel builds my pedestal because I value content creation. That's my passion. So being able to do my passions and have other people appreciate me for my passion, I consider that to be a pedestal. So is there some passion that you have and you want to kind of like change the world or contribute to society and have it be recognized? Recognition is a part of your pedestal. Yes, that's right. I'm talking about external validation. So most of the time on this channel, I tend to talk about internal validation, and we are going to talk about that in this video. But it's okay to admit to yourself that you desire some form of external validation as well. And that's okay. And always keep it a secret, by the way. You don't ever want to tell other people what type of external validation you're looking for because then, that gives them power over you. Then they have the power to take away that validation. We see this a lot with male-centered women. Whenever women are like saying that they really want to be validated by men, they really want to be perceived as pretty by men, they really want to be chosen and picked by men, and they have more of this pick-me mindset, you see men taking advantage of that. And then they will tell that woman, oh, well, you're just a 6. Well, you're just a 5. You're average. You're masculine. Well, that's because the woman put her power in another person's hands. So a part of your dark feminine tactic is to be very secretive about the exact type of validation you would like to gain. But in terms of using your feminine privilege to build your pedestal, step one is you can increase your beauty hobbies. So that's just a term I created on this channel because it's the best way I can describe it. So some women lack feminine privilege because they lack beauty hobbies. They don't have time to figure out what concealer shade looks best on them. They don't have time to figure out what length of eyelashes looks best on them. Those are probably two of the most common feminine mistakes I see women make. It is having makeup that doesn't match, having eyelashes that don't match. Like if you're going to wear fake eyelashes, you want to know what length of eyelashes looks good on your face. What length of eyelashes looks good on your actual eye. All of that stuff falls under the umbrella of beauty hobbies. So I do believe in the concept of feminine privilege, by the way. For those of you who are new to this channel, welcome to all the new subscribers. But for those of you who are new, I believe in the concept of feminine privilege. So I know that women are naturally feminine just by birth, but there is a such thing as feminine privilege in our society. So for example, if you've never been called masculine in your entire life, you have feminine privilege. If you've never been misgendered in your entire life, you have feminine privilege. If you are, generally speaking, treated like a lady, meaning you have people holding doors for you, kind of pulling out chairs for you, kind of like almost pampering you. You know how a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, you're just coddling her. You're just coddling the mixed girl. You're coddling this light skinned girl. Well, that's actually just a form of feminine privilege. That is not colorism. Colorism is when you discriminate against someone based on their skin tone. But treating someone nicely or treating someone like a princess based on their appearance, that is technically a form of feminine privilege. So they're stereotyping you as being soft and dainty or being, whatever type of femininity you're tapping into, that is a form of feminine privilege. You're receiving treatment that other women don't get. And I've seen a lot of women with feminine privilege, they will have a fluid form of feminine privilege, which I highly recommend. So for example, you know how to be the damsel in distress sometimes. So like at work, you can be the damsel in distress by reporting the person that was mean to you, and then, everybody in the office believes you. That's an example of using the damsel in distress version of femininity to your advantage. You could also be kind of like this dominatrix version of femininity. I see a lot of athletic women doing this. Women who wear like the leather and stuff like that, they have this very like sexy type of appearance, or maybe their actual body shape has a lot of this kind of sexy vibe to it. So they are using a fluid form of femininity. They know how to actually navigate through their feminine privilege. They have diversified their feminine privilege so they can use it to their advantage. One thing that a lot of women don't understand is that femininity is not a monolith and femininity is subjective. So I believe that femininity is a combination of your appearance, like feminine privilege. It's a combination of your appearance, your personality, your hobbies, your mannerisms. All of those things contribute to how others perceive you. Remember, anytime we are talking about privilege, we are talking about how others perceive you. So privilege is always going to be external. That's something that you have to remember. Other people give you the privilege. And some people are going to try to say, oh, I don't care what other people think. Okay, well, that's not a very good social strategy, because if you don't care what others think, if you don't care how you're perceived ever, then you won't know how to use other people's perception to your advantage. So that's also what gives certain women a disadvantage when it comes to feminine privilege. It's this I don't give a fuck attitude. You have to understand that there's a time and a place to not give a fuck. I mean, I'm an ENTJ. I am the queen of not giving a fuck, but I also know how to use people's perception of me to get what I want. So women who have feminine privilege, they're good at the art of seduction. They're good at the 48 laws of power, whether they realize it or not. They know how to use their femininity to get what they want. This could be getting what you want financially, getting what you want sexually, getting what you want in terms of relationships. I know that the sexual one is very controversial because people, they really want to control women's sexuality. So they get mad at women who are like sex workers, for example. That's an example of using feminine privilege to get what you want sexually. You're seducing whatever man, or you're seducing some married guy, or you're creating an OnlyFans. You're kind of seducing with your images because you have a feminine booty, you have a feminine boobs, you have feminine body parts or whatever. So you're actually using your physical appearance to seduce someone. But for the women who kind of struggle with their appearance, I've noticed that in a lot of cases, they don't know how much makeup is too much. They don't know which lace fronts look too dramatic and fake. So it's almost as if they have this forced femininity. So that's the antithesis of femininity. Femininity by nature, it's not forced. That's more masculine. Like if you think about masculine stereotypes, usually masculinity is more forced, or it kind of can appear more forced, or it has more to do with like dominance and stuff like that. And remember, privilege is based on positive stereotypes. That's really what a privilege is. There is a positive stereotype that you're benefiting from. So I believe in the concept of polarity on this channel. Just like how there are negative stereotypes, there are also positive stereotypes. Whatever the positive stereotypes are about you, that is your privilege. So feminine privilege is about playing into and benefiting from positive feminine stereotypes. Femininity is supposed to have kind of like this effortless and carefree nature to it. That's what I think of when I think of femininity. Like an image literally just popped up in my mind of a woman frolicking in flowers, and like her hair is just long and free, and she's just kind of like spinning around in a circle, almost these childlike qualities, almost like an aspect of innocence, kind of this aspect of wonder where it's like you're just in awe with your own life. You're in awe with your own beauty. You are in awe with the world around you. If you have the effect on other people to where they are in awe of you, that is absolutely a form of very strong feminine privilege. If you can make someone be in awe of your personality, they are in awe of your beauty, they're just shocked. That's where the term stunning comes from. Like, oh, she's stunning, she's breathtaking. Okay, that's an extreme form of feminine privilege because you're literally evoking these emotions. You're evoking this wonder in somebody else. Think about the time in your life that you felt the most feminine. When was that? What were you doing? Like, what did you look like? What lifestyle were you living? For me, I'm thinking about last week. And what came to mind for me is when I had my own little spa day for myself about a week ago. And I remember I specifically was wearing all pink jewelry. So like my earrings were pink, my necklace was pink, my nails were pink. So I was kind of dressing in a way that reflected my version of femininity. So I want you to think about that. Like, when did you feel the most feminine? What did you look like? How much did you weigh? What kind of hairstyle were you wearing? What hairstyles on you do you associate with femininity? Is it having big hair? Is it having sleek hair? Is it having long or short hair? Highlights? Femininity is a lifestyle. When people talk about the soft life, they're talking about femininity because the soft life is when you have an abundance of time and resources to invest in yourself. That's really at the essence of femininity for me. It's about having an abundance of time and resources to invest in myself. I get to invest in my beauty hobbies. I get to spend time working on my creative pursuits. That's why I associate passion with femininity. Like, I feel like this YouTube channel, it increases my feminine privilege because I'm birthing something new. I feel like birthing new things, that is an inherent part of femininity. So that's why I associate creativity with being feminine, because you're literally birthing a new project. You're birthing a new business. You're birthing a new thing for yourself, whatever it is. And you get to nurture it and watch it grow. Think about the women who have gardens. That's another version of kind of expressing their femininity. They're taking something that was once a seed, and then they're planting it, they're watering it, they're nurturing it, they're protecting it from the sun, they're protecting it from the elements, and then they watch it grow over time. So leveling up is inherently feminine because you're coming up with these ideas, that's the seed, and then you're planting it, and then you're watering it by being consistent. Like, you have to have consistency. Consistency is a part of femininity. So a lot of women, they struggle with feminine privilege because they lack consistency as a personality trait. They literally don't have the personality trait of consistency. That's why sometimes their body looks good, sometimes their body looks a mess. Sometimes their skin looks good, sometimes their skin looks a mess. Sometimes their finances look good, sometimes it's a mess. Well, it's because they lack the feminine trait of consistency, kind of that concept of planting a seed, watering it, or you know how women get pregnant. It's like, you have to consistently take care of your body in order for that baby to come to term. So a part of feminine privilege, like one of the core shadow traits that a lot of women miss, is the actual consistency side of it. Even when it comes to physical appearance, you know, the women that have long, thick, healthy hair, it required consistency for them to have that long hair. So I feel like it's actually laughable. You got people, they're making fun of women for getting blonde highlights. They're making fun of women for like having a different hair texture or texturizers and relaxers or whatever, but they don't realize that it still required consistency for them to maintain those highlights. It required consistency for them to grow out their hair in the first place. But another thing I like to do is memorizing my feminine triggers. Yeah, that's right, triggers. You know how people have negative triggers? I also believe in the concept of positive triggers. What situations and time periods trigger your femininity? So for me, something that triggers my femininity is my ovulation period, like during my cycle. Whenever I'm ovulating, it's a positive trigger for me. I feel very creative. Like, actually, one of the times I felt the most feminine recently was when I was ovulating. I had so much creative energy that day that I remember I was doing creative activities for 7 hours straight without stopping. That is not my normal state. Usually I need to take a break. Usually I will, eat something. I mean, I don't know, go on a walk. But that day, because I was so triggered, I was positively triggered, it caused me to be more creative than normal. By the way, creativity is one of the fundamental basics of femininity. Some women struggle and they don't have feminine privilege because they lack creativity. They're trying to copy somebody else's phenotype, somebody else's makeup style that doesn't suit their face, somebody else's concealer shade that doesn't go with their skin tone, somebody else's eyelash length that doesn't match their own eyes. So, lacking in creativity privilege, that's something that hinders women from having feminine privilege because it's almost as if they're putting on a mask of somebody else's version of femininity rather than creating their own personal pedestal. So they're actually contributing to somebody else's feminine pedestal when they do this copying thing, when it's not authentic. Being inauthentic, it builds other people's pedestal. It doesn't build your own pedestal. But what are your positive feminine triggers? Do certain environments make you feel more feminine? Yoga makes me feel feminine. Going to yoga class, that triggers my sense of femininity. Being out in nature makes me feel feminine. Being around flowers, like I buy myself flowers whenever I go to the grocery store, that makes me feel feminine. So just like how there are negative triggers that cause you to spiral in a negative way, I also believe in the polarity, which is that there are positive triggers that cause you to tap into your femininity more. You don't want your femininity to be male-centered. For some women, the only time they feel feminine is if a man is around. That's an example of more of an external locus of control. So you always want to keep your pedestal internalized. You always want to have an internal locus of control and try to curate your own personal version of femininity and your own personal pedestal, because if it's internalized, nobody can take that shit away. Nobody can take your pedestal from you because you created it. You spent the time and the energy and you created those beauty hobbies for yourself so that you could have your own version of femininity. Another thing you have to remember too is that in our society, every ethnicity has its own standard of femininity. So, for example, I see a lot of Black women who have a problem with the Black standard of femininity because it doesn't match their phenotype. They think that the Black standard of femininity is like being light skinned or mixed or whatever. Okay, so if you don't like a certain ethnicity standard of femininity, do not follow that standard. You can either create your own standard, you can pick and choose whichever other feminine standards you do resonate with, because every ethnicity has its own version of femininity. Every geographical location has its own version of femininity. For example, the Southern Belle. That is a version of femininity that is literally based on a geographical location. It's called the Southern Belle because it's based on the South of the United States. I don't hear them talking about Southern belles on the West Coast, trying to become a Southern belle. They want to dress like a Southern belle. No. Another way that you can start to get a diversified view of femininity is to look at the fashion industry. The fashion trends, especially like fast fashion, they do this all the time. They tap into certain standards of femininity or they create a new standard of femininity. For example, the coquette aesthetic. That is a certain standard of femininity in terms of clothing. And then there's the ballerina or like ballet core. Then there's the Pilates princess. Then there's athleisure. So all of those fashion styles are actually different versions of feminine archetypes. So you don't have to just get depressed because, oh, I don't feel like I fit into XYZ standard of femininity. You can create your own feminine standard. Or you can take on the feminine standard that already exists that resonates with you. Whichever one's easier for you to do, that's the route you want to go down. I personally have a fluid standard of femininity. So I've talked about how I have a fluid beauty standard. I also have a fluid standard of femininity too. So I will change up my style, especially around the holidays, because the holidays, just holidays in general, are a positive trigger for my femininity. And that's because whenever a certain holiday comes up, I get into decoration mode, I get into creative mode, I start dressing differently. So, like around Christmas, I start wearing more red and green. I start getting those little earrings. You know, the little nerdy earrings where it has like a candy cane on it or something? It's like a sparkly ball or something. I start doing stuff like that because holidays are a trigger for my femininity. Because holidays make me feel carefree. Holidays remind me of my inner child. Oh, and that's another thing too. Some women have a bad relationship with their femininity because they had a bad childhood or they never healed their inner girl. So they've got this wounded young woman living inside of them and they didn't go out of their way to nurture her and to bring healing to her. So they're walking around kind of in like this defense mode or kind of like in a fight mode. Is fighting and being defensive, is that generally associated with feminine privilege or masculine privilege? Usually fighting and being defensive is associated more so with masculinity. So some women, they can't tap into their femininity because they have toxic masculine personality traits. So remember, femininity is not a monolith. You've got feminine privilege in terms of appearance, there's feminine privilege in terms of personality. So in terms of personality, the women who do not have feminine privilege, they exhibit toxic masculine traits. For example, hypercompetitiveness. That is an extremely toxic masculine trait. So when they have this mindset of, oh, you got to compete in the dating market, you got to compete with the mixed girls, you got to compete with the non-black women, you have to compete with this other girl over here. Okay, that's actually a masculine trait. Coming in and wanting to dominate and subjugate other women by competing with them. And then, hierarchy thinking, that is associated with masculinity. Who created hierarchies? Who created hierarchy thinking in our society? Historically, which gender created all these different hierarchies and upholds them the most? It's men. So hierarchy thinking is actually an aspect of masculine traits. So that's another thing to think about. In terms of personality traits, what personality traits do you associate with the different styles of femininity? So for example, bubbly personalities. I'm thinking of like a feminine cheerleader, that sort of feminine archetype. That's one example. Another example of kind of feminine personality traits, I'm thinking of mothers, the women who have like this nurturing spirit, kind of like this caregiving spirit. So you can also start to think of different personality traits that you associate with femininity. Who is the most feminine woman you've ever met who has a feminine personality? Like, what is your standard? Who pops up in your mind when you think of feminine personalities? So Tyla actually just popped up in my mind. Tyla, the singer, she popped up in my mind. And I'm pretty sure it's because Tyla, she has a very carefree type of energy, in my opinion. She has a very carefree spirit. I've never seen Tyla popping off and arguing or fighting on social media. Every time I come across Tyla on my timeline, she's dancing, she's smiling, she's making that silly face where she like does the eyebrow thing. So you can just think of whoever pops up in your mind, who pops up of having a feminine personality. It could be a celebrity, it could be your family member, it could be yourself. That's actually a good sign if it's yourself. That's good. That means that you have probably curated your own unique version of having a feminine personality. And when it comes to feminine personality privilege, I'm thinking of the women who know how to attract what they want. I think of a woman that's magnetic. That is a personality trait that I associate with feminine privilege. So you know how some women are like, oh, I have a certain type of man that I'm trying to attract, but like my type doesn't like me, or I have a certain job that I want to get, but that job doesn't want me. So they're constantly in this state of feeling unwanted. They're dealing with a lot of rejection. That's the exact opposite of what I consider to be feminine privilege. When I think of feminine privilege, I'm thinking of a woman who chooses herself. So she's always chosen. There is no looking externally for somebody else to choose her. I think of a woman that has seductive qualities. She knows how to utilize the art of seduction to get what she wants. And by the way, seduction is not just a sexual thing. I actually feel like seduction, marketing and advertising, that's a form of seduction. So seduction is more about persuasion. She's able to persuade people with her looks, with her mannerisms, with her personality, with her social status. Social status is a very powerful form of seduction. And this is why I say that beauty is a form of social power. Social power and social status, I use those terms interchangeably. So, social power is a part of feminine privilege. I feel like creating your own internalized standard of femininity, that will help you build your pedestal. So, in the same way that we've talked about creating our own internalized beauty standard without the help of others, not allowing other women to try to project onto us what type of beauty standard we should have. That's another thing, too. Anytime a woman tries to forcefully tell you what type of femininity you should have, that woman is actually being masculine because she's trying to dominate and subjugate your mind. She's trying to forcefully brainwash you into thinking that you are inherently masculine or that you're doing femininity wrong. No, she's actually projecting. But another aspect of feminine privilege is being able to get away with being aggressive, being feisty, being strong, etc. That's actually a form of feminine privilege. I personally feel like I have an extremely aggressive type of personality. I really do feel like I have a lot of aggression and assertiveness in my personality, but nobody seems to really notice it until I bring it up. But that's because of feminine privilege. So feminine privilege, actually, part of the privilege is it cancels out your quote unquote masculine traits or like these quote unquote negative traits. I see a lot of people, they try to critique the exotical space and they'll be like, oh, Ice Spice is not a representation of femininity, or so-and-so celebrity that you used in your thumbnail, they are not feminine. Okay, well, feminine privilege is that you're not insecure about your femininity. So Ice Spice, I can use whatever celebrities I want because I don't have those same inferiority complexes about my femininity. I don't feel the need to engage in performative femininity because I'm smart enough to know as a woman with feminine privilege that femininity is not a monolith. You can be feminine and sexy. You can be feminine and wholesome. You can be feminine and ghetto and hood. You can be feminine and from the suburbs. You can be feminine and nerdy. So I understand that femininity, there's fluidity within femininity in and of itself. That's an aspect of feminine privilege. So I can get away with being quote unquote aggressive or assertive. I can get away with these quote unquote negative masculine traits because my overall feminine privilege seems to balance it out or seems to erase it completely. Nobody seems to notice it. That's feminine privilege. If you've never been called masculine or aggressive in your life, like for me personally, that's not one of my traumas. I don't have the trauma of being consistently called masculine, aggressive, etc. Avoiding traumas is a privilege. If you've never been misgendered, you have feminine privilege. If you've never been mistaken as a man multiple times, you have feminine privilege. If people are describing you as a girly girl, you have feminine privilege. If they're constantly describing you as being a quote unquote princess, if people's insults against you are feminine, that's a sign you have feminine privilege. Like if people tell you, oh, you just think you're a perfect little princess. Oh, you just think you're so cute and bubbly. Like if they say stuff like that, that's a sign that you have an extreme form of feminine privilege. If you have never had to feel insecure about your actual womanhood, you have feminine privilege. If you have never had to feel insecure about being treated like a woman or being treated like a lady, you have feminine privilege. It's because you've always received a certain baseline of respect for your femininity. That's really what feminine privilege is. Other people subconsciously respect your femininity. So for example, when you wear pink, when you wear a dress, when you wear jewelry, you don't look like a clown cosplaying. You don't look like a clown. You feel comfortable with your jewelry on. You feel comfortable when you curl your hair. You feel comfortable when you put on a little bit of makeup. You don't feel like an imposter. You don't have imposter syndrome with your femininity. Okay, that's because you have feminine privilege. You've never had to deal with the imposter syndrome of femininity. So it's not even a thought in your mind because you've just been living in it for so long. That's an absolute privilege. That's a huge privilege. The fact that you wake up in the morning, you don't even have to think about being perceived as feminine or not. That's not even a thought that crosses your mind. You have feminine privilege. But something that can hold women back too is being in environments where femininity is not appreciated. That sets you up to not have feminine privilege. For example, having toxic masculine mothers. So, a mother that has toxic masculine traits, maybe your mom was fighting you, maybe she was throwing hands at you, cussing you out, etc. That sets up young girls to not have a good relationship with their own femininity because they're in an environment where it's not safe to be feminine. So if the first feminine role model in your life tried to hinder your femininity, that's an example of an environment where your femininity can't be cultivated. So for some women, it's not that they're not feminine. It's not necessarily that they're insecure about their femininity. It's more so that they just haven't had a safe space to cultivate their femininity. So I have seen this phenomenon with certain groups of women where they literally have not had a safe space to cultivate their femininity because of their mothers and fathers or lack thereof, because they just don't have a safe space. So that's an example of maybe not having feminine privilege because you were not able to be in an environment to create a safe space for your femininity. So the way you can heal that is as an adult, getting your own apartment or, cutting off friends. This is why some women, you see a lot of feminine privileged women going through seasons of isolation, myself included, because you had to cut off those quote unquote masculine friends. You had to cut off the friends or the family members or people in your life who didn't give you an emotional safe space to be feminine. So this is why when you come across feminine privileged women, you're almost always going to hear them tell a story about how, they had to cut off their whole friend group, or maybe they had a lot of enemies because quote unquote masculine women are extremely threatened by feminine women. Having beauty, first of all, pretty privilege, that gives you automatic access to feminine privilege because people associate beauty with femininity. So if you're a pretty girl in an environment where the other women hate femininity, you're going to go through this season of isolation. We see this happening a lot with pretty women in the workplace, with feminine women who come into the office with their cute little dresses on. They come in the office with their suits on. They've decorated their cubicle. It's all pink and pretty. It's all sparkly. You see these kind of masculine women, I call them basic betties, but you see these basic betties trying to attack that woman because that workplace is actually not a safe space for her to cultivate her femininity. A big part of maintaining your feminine lifestyle is by setting yourself up to be in environments where your femininity is safe. So, in my case, I've switched jobs. I think I've had 15 to 20 jobs, like a very high number. Like the last time I counted how many jobs I had, it was about 15. So something else you may witness if you're a feminine privileged woman, but you're in an environment where that's not respected, you might find yourself job hopping. You might find yourself relationship hopping, because you attract a lot of men. Your feminine privilege causes you to attract a lot of men. Your natural seduction causes you to attract relationships, but then maybe when you get into the relationship, it's not necessarily the most safe space for you to cultivate your femininity. So this is why sometimes you'll see feminine privileged women kind of jumping from relationship to relationship. And it's not that they're purposely trying to do that. That's a misconception. A lot of people think that pretty feminine privileged women, that they are just codependent and that they just jump into the relationships. No, when you have the feminine privilege and the pretty privilege, men are chasing you all the time. So if men are constantly chasing you and you're in a state of vulnerability, and then this man comes along, he offers to pay your bills, he offers you a place to stay, he offers you a new job. A lot of women take that opportunity. So women's relationship dynamics as feminine privileged women, it's totally different than what the non-feminine privileged women think. Because I've noticed that masculine women, they think that feminine woman is chasing after the men. No, that's what the masculine women are doing. So that's why they call you a hoe or whatever. They say that you're chasing after guys, you're just trying to be fast. No, they're saying that because that's what they would do, because they don't know what it's like to be feminine and be pursued. And that's because they don't have feminine privilege. Part of feminine privilege is being magnetic. So a lot of women, their magnetism, it manifests in different ways. Some women are magnetic, they attract a lot of men. Some women are magnetic in the sense that they attract opportunities. They attract a lot of jobs and stuff like that. They attract status, they attract fame. They attract popularity. So having a lot of magnetism just as a part of your personality, that's a part of feminine privilege. So some women, depending on their environment, the environment is not safe for them to cultivate their femininity. But that's okay because that's why we have the Pretty Girl Club. You are safe to express your femininity however you see fit. And that's another thing actually that hinders someone's feminine privilege. It is having people trying to put you in a certain box of femininity. So, for example, with the red pill, I noticed they put women in a box of femininity. The only way to be feminine is if you kind of do what he says, you submit to him, etc. I noticed in the black community, sometimes the only way to be feminine is if you fit whatever aesthetic they think is cute. So if you dress in like punk rock clothing or you kind of express almost like this gothic version of femininity, that is considered weird. It's othered. So you want to get away from those environments because people with that mindset, they lack creativity. So that's why they think femininity is a monolith, is because their minds, they're very small-minded in terms of what femininity is and how it can be expressed. And by the way, when I talk about being pro beauty enhancement or having a fluid beauty standard, that's actually about femininity and freedom. A lot of people think that we support beauty enhancements out of self-hate. No, it's the exact opposite. For me, being able to change my hair and makeup, that's a part of my freedom of expression. Feminine privilege is about freedom of expression. I can express my beauty how I want to. And that's because my internalized standard of femininity is having freedom. I associate femininity with being carefree. That is my internalized femininity standard. How do others describe your femininity? Do you base your femininity on internal or external qualities? So, for example, my personality type is an ENTJ. I actually consider my own personality type to be more masculine in nature, just based on the qualities. So whenever I want to tap more into feminine personality privilege, I may be a bit more quiet than normal. That's because being mysterious to me, that's a part of feminine privilege. In terms of personality, I really do feel like having an aspect of mystery to you that can increase your feminine privilege. That's a part of why I'm an anonymous content creator. I enjoy the mystery about who I am. I feel like when you have kind of this feminine aura, there is this natural wonder that people have. They're wondering about you. They're wondering who you are. They're wondering what your life is like, what your personality is like. If people are invading your privacy, that's a sign that you have feminine privilege because you're so magnetic. You're drawing people to you to the point where they're so obsessed with you that they want to invade you. That's why they're asking all of these questions about you. That's why they're starting rumors about you. It's because you're a goddess. Think about the concept of a god or goddess. A god has a lot of myths about it. Like think of a supernatural being. Supernatural beings have myths and stories that people tell about them. Some of them are accurate, some of them are inaccurate. They argue about what's true about said god or goddess. So if you've got people starting rumors about you, they're creating all these narratives about you, that's actually proof that you have feminine privilege. Because you're literally a mystical being at that point. You are a mystical being in their minds. That's how much of a pedestal you're on. So if they're trying to make you their standard of living, you're their standard of dating, you're their standard of beauty, and you're also their standard of conversation, because you're the topic of conversation, that's a sign that you actually have feminine privilege. You're a literal goddess being worshipped. They're actually worshiping you without realizing it, because worship, that word worship, that has to do with like meditating on something, thinking about some person or thinking about a certain being. So if you're living in other people's heads rent-free, did you know that's actually a form of worship? That is technically, by definition, a form of being worshipped. So they're actually building your pedestal even further. So having this mystery about you to the point where people are asking questions about you, that's a part of feminine privilege. But I want you to think of the most feminine woman you know. What does she look like? What does she talk like? What personality traits does she have? Is she a real human or is she a creature? And I'm asking because a mermaid just popped up into my mind. You guys know I love mermaids. I love feminine creatures. They're actually a big part of my internalized beauty and femininity standards. I'm also thinking of Aphrodite. But when she popped up into my head, I thought of like a faceless woman coming out of the water with long hair. So that's something else. That tells me that my personal femininity standard is long, thick, flowing hair and kind of a thin body shape because Aphrodite is thin. She's not obese. And she has kind of this ethereal nature about her. Like she's mysterious. Nobody actually knows who Aphrodite is or what her personal information is. So, do you have a feminine internalized standard that is actually based on creatures or animals or colors? Like for me personally, pink, that is a feminine color to me. That's the most feminine color to me. That's my feminine standard of color. So, for some people, you kind of have this abstract version of thinking. I notice I'm a very abstract thinker. So, when somebody says that word feminine, what pops up in my mind is the color pink. Flowers just popped up in my mind. Dresses just popped up in my mind. Another image of a girl spinning around in flowers with a dress on, that popped up in my mind. Even like those little head wraps, they kind of look like a bandana. I think they're called bandanas. The coquette aesthetic where they're wearing this little head scarf thing, that popped up in my mind. Kind of like that cottagecore aesthetic where she's wearing a headscarf with like a matching top and a matching dress or something. So when I say that word feminine, what images pop up in your head? That is your internalized standard of femininity. So if you want to increase your feminine privilege, become more like whatever just popped up in your head. Cheerleaders also just popped up in my head just now. So that means that skirts, I associate skirts with feminine privilege. I associate athleticism and smiling. I just thought of a random smiling cheerleader. Like that just popped up in my head. A panda just popped up in my head. So that means I literally associate certain animals with femininity. A tiger just popped up in my head, and Princess Jasmine popped up in my head just now when I was thinking of femininity. So you can actually start to dissect and analyze why you find each thing feminine. So the reason a panda popped up is probably because I think pandas are cute in real life. That's one of my favorite animals. They're cute, they're fuzzy, I like their eyes and their nose. A koala bear just popped up in my head. Bambi the deer just popped up in my head. I noticed that like these eyes, kind of this doe eye, my mind seems to associate that with femininity. So an example of increasing my feminine privilege could be doing some sort of doe-eyed makeup look or something. A princess just popped up into my mind. Oh, I just had an epiphany actually. So the reason that the bandana popped up in my head a second ago is because I associate those coquette bandanas with like a princess. So like the little napkin on your head with like the matching little frilly dress, my mind associates that with being very feminine, like a princess. The Asian beauty standard where it's like they have those frilly dresses and they have like these corsets and kind of these poofy skirts. I think it's called kawaii fashion. That just popped up in my head. A part of the reason why some women don't have feminine privilege is because they literally don't spend enough time thinking feminine thoughts, if that makes sense. Like who you are, your identity, it is what you think, what you feel, how you behave. That's literally a part of your identity. So the reason that some women don't have femininity as a part of their identity is because they don't think about it. They don't think about feminine things. They don't have feminine hobbies or like they don't associate themselves with femininity. So I love having these long videos where it's like we kind of brainstorm and we kind of get our wheels turning thinking about feminine things. Oh, I just randomly thought of a sparkly mermaid in my head. So sparkles, that reminds me of femininity, like the diamond tiaras that they wear at the pageant or like sparkly diamonds and like something magical. I feel like there's something magical and supernatural about femininity. I feel like there's something magical about like wearing these sparkly items and sparkly jewels. So that's another thing that just popped up in my head. I associate femininity with sparkles. So a way to increase my feminine privilege or a way to see myself as more feminine, maybe I can wear a sparkly eyeshadow or something. Maybe I can wear a small necklace. I noticed that some women, they say that, oh, you should wear dainty jewelry. Okay, I don't necessarily associate femininity with dainty jewelry. But if you do, then yes, you should wear dainty jewelry. But just remember, femininity isn't a monolith. This video is created for you to start getting your wheels turning. Like, what colors do you associate with femininity? Like, when I say that word, feminine, what popped up in your head? Valentine's Day actually just popped up in my head. Like Valentine's Day decorations, so hearts. That means that I associate hearts with femininity. So I could get a sweater that has some hearts on it. I can put some hearts on my nails, or like, you know what I mean? So I just thought of the colors pink and red. So the color red, I associate that with femininity because it represents seduction. My brain seems to associate femininity with seduction with the color red. Now roses are popping up in my mind. I'm thinking of like a sweetheart neckline. You know the neckline where it's like, it kind of cups over your boobs? I'll show images of it. So that actually reminds me of femininity because your chest area is literally shaped like a heart. And that would also make sense as to why my feminine beauty standard is kind of an hourglass body shape, because your butt, like when you sit down, I feel like your butt looks like an upside down heart, or at least I feel like that's how my butt looks. This is so random. So when I use that phrase, feminine body shape, what body type just popped up into your head? So for me, a small hourglass shape just popped up into my head, kind of a skinny hourglass. So for some of you guys, maybe a six-pack popped up into your mind, maybe athletic shoulders popped into your head. And by the way, is your feminine standard male-centered? One reason that some women struggle with their relationship with their femininity is because it's male-centered. Instead of making my femininity completely male-centered, I like to focus on my overall seduction style. So we talk a lot about this in the Patreon. By the way, be sure to join the Patreon. It's only $5 a month, and you also get access to the Discord. We talk about sex in there. We talk about seduction in there. So what is your seduction style? Because that is something that human beings do every day. It's just a form of persuading people. So for example, whenever they advertise you like donuts or fast food stuff, what they did was they used an attractive image of that item to persuade you into wanting to obtain it. So they created this magnetic pull, basically. They're trying to magnetically pull you to purchase their products. That's a form of seduction. They're seducing your brain into desiring the donut or desiring that product. So I like to think of seduction like that, because that way I'm decentering men from my standard of seduction. I'm just thinking of seduction in more of a persuasive mindset, where it's like I'm trying to persuade someone of something, or I'm trying to manipulate people's perception of me. Seduction is actually about being able to subliminally influence the desires of other people. So when you walk into a room, do you ever feel like a certain man desires you? Do you ever feel like a woman actually desires your identity? Because that's a sign that you actually have a very strong feminine privilege, because you're actually seducing other women into wanting to be you. So this is where we get this concept of destiny swapping and all that. If people are destiny swapping or trying to destiny swap with you, if they literally want to wear your skin, that's because you have an extremely powerful version of feminine privilege. You're so magnetic to the point where other women can see it and they literally want to steal your magnetism. It's kind of like in the fairy tales where it's like you got this pretty princess and then you got the old hag that wants to steal her beauty or steal her powers or whatever. It's a very similar phenomenon. So if you're one of those women who has had a lot of other women try to destiny swap with you, they want to wear your skin, they start copying you and emulating you, that's because your feminine privilege is actually so powerful and so magnetic to the point where you're actually being worshipped. That's a form of worship. Mimicking the object of worship, that's a form of pedestalizing them. You're centering that other person by trying to directly mimic them or completely changing your identity to be like them. So a lot of feminine privileged women, we have experienced this where other women, they want to destiny swap with us, and so they'll do everything in their power to try to attain our magnetism that we have naturally. And the reason they're doing that is because there's something about your aura that is just so seductive and so magnetic to the point where these other girls are like, oh my God, I have to have that. I have to have that quality. And you know that you have this magnetic privilege when people start accusing you of witchcraft, or when they start trying to do witchcraft on you. So like, for example, one of the Exoticals, she wrote a story time about a girl trying to do root work on her. Maybe you're a girl who grew up in the church and people in the church accused you of being a witch or trying to seduce others, or they accused you of having some sort of Jezebel spirit. Well, you just have a magnetic spirit is really what it is. You're so magnetic. Your feminine privilege is so strong and so seductive and magnetic to the point where people are literally scared of it. They're literally scared of your power. They literally view seduction as almost like this magical power. So that's a sign that you have feminine privilege. You have this ethereal nature about yourself. You have this otherworldly nature about yourself. But some women struggle with seduction because they have bad social anxiety. This is why I promote beauty so much on this channel, because I really do feel like beauty helps reduce your social anxiety, because you're not worried about your weight. You're not worried about your acne. You're not worried about your hair breakage or whatever. You don't have all these micro insecurities piling up. An inferiority complex is when someone has dozens or hundreds of micro insecurities that build up over time to the point where they begin to have limiting beliefs. That's an inferiority complex. It's a set of limiting beliefs that comes from underlying micro insecurities. It doesn't come from these big, huge, gigantic insecurities. No, it comes from stacking these little tiny insecurities. Oh, I'm insecure about my nose. I don't like my lips. I don't really like my skin tone. I don't really like my eyelashes. I don't really like how I look without makeup. Those are all micro insecurities that build up. And so that's why before you know it, by the time you become an adult, after years and years and years of brainwashing yourself into hating these features or, becoming more and more insecure, next thing you know, you have an entire inferiority complex. And this is a part of why I don't mind being told I have a superiority complex. I actually don't see that as an insult, because if I had to choose between feeling superior or feeling inferior, I'd rather feel superior all day long. But how can you stay in a state of femininity? Because your environment affects your ability to kind of manifest that feminine privilege. So one thing I like to do is I like to collect feminine items. So if you see any like pens or pencils or erasers or flowers, whatever it is, feminine items, looking at those is a way to kind of remind your brain to stay in that state of femininity. So I told you guys, like, I buy myself flowers when I go shopping. You can also feminize your environment. So what decorations, what colors, what furniture do you associate with femininity? Like in my case, I might light some candles that smell good. I might get some paintings with certain scenery on them. I also forgot to talk about the concept of glamour magic. I noticed that's what they are calling it on the internet. They're kind of spiritualizing it. Glamour magic, all that is you're just setting your intentions. You're kind of deciding what your internalized beauty standard is. Because like I said, you only have two options. Either become your internalized beauty standard or let somebody else be your beauty standard. Those are the only options. You can either change yourself to meet your beauty standard or accept the fact that you will never meet your internalized beauty standard. So whichever one's easier, one's not better than the other. But I do think that there is a strategy that comes with building feminine privilege, or like using that as a part of your pedestal. So you want to determine what your internalized standard of femininity is. What kind of lifestyle does this feminine woman live? How does she interact with the world? I'm thinking of Audrey Hepburn. She just popped up into my mind. Marilyn Monroe just popped up into my mind. I just thought of Emily in Paris and Gossip Girl. All of those things just randomly popped up into my mind just now. And I think that's because I kind of associate femininity with being playful. A lot of women, they lack feminine privilege, especially when it comes to like dating and all that, because they don't know how to be playful. They don't know how to be playful without negging. They don't know how to be playful without cussing, hitting, yelling, aggression, etc. So that's more of like a masculine form of seduction. That's another thing as well. Like part of why some women are perceived as, kind of like concubines, Part of why some women are perceived that way is because of their seduction style as well. So I do believe in the concept of feminine privilege in terms of seduction. So, how do you want to seduce? Like, do you want to seduce the other person, or do you want them to seduce you? Do you want to be chased? Because if so, how are you going to position yourself or set yourself up to be chased? How are you going to magnetize whatever type of attention you're trying to get? How do you magnetically draw subscribers to your YouTube channel, for example? How do you magnetically draw attention to yourself at the bar? How do you magnetically draw attention to yourself in general? Those are all things to think about when you are building your pedestal. So, for example, some women use feminine privilege. Let's say they're, I don't know, attracting a man or something like that. Usually I don't talk about men until I'm at least an hour into my videos. But let's say you're trying to attract some guy or something. How do you do that using your feminine privilege? Most women don't know how to do that. The way that they'll do it is maybe they punch the guy in the arm. Just very juvenile, very high school types of behaviors. Punching somebody in the arm, hitting someone as a form of flirting, that is going to come off as naturally a little bit more masculine. Like, I've literally seen women do this. I've seen women from certain groups literally punch guys in the arm, and they're trying to be playful, but they just don't understand how to be playful. And so they punch a guy in the arm playfully, then they punch him hard as fuck. This guy has a bruise on his arm now. And then they'll be talking about how they want to divest. Punching a guy in the arm at the bar, that's probably not a great way to exercise your feminine privilege. That's giving more masculine seduction style. So you may want to think about that too, like in terms of flirtation. What is a way that you use your feminine privilege when you're flirting? Because some women bat their eyelashes, and apparently some women punch guys in the arm. Some women use flattery and compliments, and then other women will use negging and insults. Which one do you think has more feminine privilege? Which flirting and seduction style do you think manifests more feminine privilege? I've also seen some women where, like, if they're in the presence of men they're attracted to, they start randomly talking like a man. They'll start using all this like slang, like kind of this gangster slang, or like this. They'll call a guy dude or bro. They just randomly start talking like a guy. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, she has a crush on one of these guys. Like, she told me she likes this guy. So why is she trying to randomly talk like a man now? Like, that's not a feminine privileged seduction style, generally speaking. That's more of a masculine style of seduction. So a part of your feminine privilege is going to be navigating that side of yourself as well. The seductive part of yourself, the sensual side of yourself. Do you express yourself in a sensual way that's more masculine? Seduction is not always about manipulation. That's another misconception I've seen in a lot of like feminine spaces on YouTube, or they claim to be kind of femininity spaces. They think seduction is a monolith. They think seduction is only about persuasion and manipulation, but sometimes your seduction is actually based on your unique qualities. It's about owning your own confidence, your own natural allure. Whatever it is that makes you special. This could be your physical appearance. You know how women back in the 90s, they would always show their beauty mark? Like if they had a little mark on their face, they would make sure that they don't put makeup on that part of their face. That's an example of using your unique qualities to be seductive. She is literally being seductive with something as simple as a mole on her face. So having a unique version of femininity, that is another way that you increase your feminine privilege. If you're the only one who's dressed like a princess and everybody else is dressed like a thug, all the other girls look like they're about to go to a boxing match. They all look like they just came from the laundromat. They look like they just rolled out of bed, but you're the only one that looks like a princess. Well, that's going to give you an aspect of feminine privilege because your creativity has caused you to stand out. So flirting and seduction and stuff, it's not just about manipulation. It's not just about persuasion. It's also about using your own unique qualities, your physical appearance, your voice, your mannerisms, how your body looks, using all of that stuff to draw positive attention to yourself. I've noticed a lot of women talk about scent. They talk about having a signature scent. Okay, but some of these women are wearing way too much perfume. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. They're wearing too much fucking perfume to where I literally become nauseous when I'm hanging out with them. That's an example of forced femininity. You don't know when to stop. You keep on dousing yourself in perfume to the point where you're drenched, and now the whole office smells bad. Everybody doesn't like the same scent. So for some women, they don't know how to use charm. Like they're trying too hard to be charming and then they end up like doing too much, if that makes sense. Kind of like with the playful thing where it's like you punch a guy in the arm super hard. Okay, you were trying to be playful. The intention was to be playful, but the actual way that you executed it didn't come off as playful. So having a flirting strategy is another major form of feminine privilege because flirting doesn't mean sex. A lot of people, they mistake flirting for like sexual attention. No, flirting doesn't have to be sexual attention. I consider flirting to be more playful. It could be playful attention. Flirting, it is a way to show that you're attracted to someone. So like if you and this guy are flirting with each other, it's you two expressing your attraction to one another. So this is a major point of failure for some women. Like they don't know how to express their attraction to someone because they're scared of expressing their emotions. Not being able to express your emotions, that completely cancels out feminine privilege. Because some women are actually very bad at emotional regulation. Some women don't know how to express emotions other than anger, social justice, complaints, calling out flaws. That's the only way they express their emotions. They don't know how to express happiness. They don't know how to express emotional support or, validating someone else. Flirting is actually when you are giving someone else validation. That's when you're validating others. So a lot of women, they lack feminine privilege because they're not good at validating others. And then they don't receive validation back because, what you put out is what you get back, right? Well, what happened to that talking point? Whatever you put out is whatever you get back. Karma, XYZ. Okay, so if you believe in karma and like whatever you put out is what you get back, so then that means if you're not receiving validation or a pedestal, it's because you're not giving validation. You're not giving pedestals. Flirting is a form of giving a pedestal to somebody else. You're flirting with the guy at the bar. You think he's cute. Okay, so you're giving him a version of like male pretty privilege or like handsome privilege by complimenting him, by validating his appearance. So that's a form of you giving someone else a pedestal. But some women, they're not tapped into their own femininity and they're scared of giving others a pedestal because they have an inferiority complex. So they feel like if I give somebody else a pedestal, that puts me at the bottom. Well, that's proof that you don't put yourself on a pedestal. You literally just exposed your own internalized inferiority. So for some women, they're not good at like dating and flirting and all that because they don't know how to be playful. And that's because they didn't get a chance to play in their childhood. They don't have a chance to play after work. They don't show up for themselves. They don't allow themselves to be playful at home. They don't allow themselves to be playful just in life in general. So of course, she's not going to be able to be playful when it comes to seduction. Like if you're the type of woman who wants to use your feminine privilege to attain the male gaze or some sort of pedestal that has to do with men, you have to think about the most common ways that a guy would want to be flirted with. This is whatever guy you like. I'm not talking about men in general. I'm not talking about being a pick-me, and I'm not talking about dusties. But that is something that a lot of women don't think about. So when the time comes to get that feminine privilege, these are the women that get jealous when you get the attention from some random guys at a bar. Like I know for me personally, I've literally had women get jealous because some white guy gave me attention. So that shows that they really wanted white male attention. So whatever type of male attention you're looking for, you want to be able to analyze that within yourself, be able to decide like, okay, what kind of male attention do I want? White male, black male, Mexican, whatever, rich, poor, old, young, ugly men, attractive men, what? And you want to be clear on that because having clarity is a part of your magnetism. So what kind of men? Men that paid my bills? For those of you who are getting your bills paid by men, let's say you're some sort of ex-worker, you're some sort of woman who gets paid to do stuff like that. Okay, so what kind of client are you trying to magnetize towards you? Because a part of feminine privilege when it comes to flirting is having different flirting strategies or kind of knowing what type of flirting that guy prefers and then being able to do that. So The most common ways people like being flirted with are compliments. That's like the number one most common. So, not being able to compliment others, it actually takes away from your feminine privilege because you're not able to make other people open up and make them like you more because you're not validating their appearance, you're not validating their beauty. This is the number one thing that I see a lot of like Black women struggle with. They're not good at complimenting others, not just other women, but this could also mean men as well. So then they'll get mad if, let's say you compliment a guy's shirt. Some women are so scared of rejection to the point where they can't even compliment others. They can't flirt. That's impossible for them because flirting opens you up to rejection. You can flirt with someone and then get ignored. You can flirt with someone and then they walk away. I posted the videos about Afrotech where the woman, she was trying to flirt with the man. She was trying to dance with him and then he actually walked away. So that's one of the risks of flirting. And that's why I also don't recommend shaking your ass as the main version of flirting because, then if the guy doesn't like it, it's a bigger form of like rejection basically and makes you look even more crazy. But for some women, they don't have a flirting style. They don't have feminine privilege when it comes to that area. And so that's why they struggle. It's because they don't know what type of flirting to do. They don't know how to give a compliment. They don't really know what to give a compliment on. Another thing that makes you magnetic when it comes to your feminine privilege is having confidence. So a way that you show confidence in like a co-ed setting, for example, maybe you're dancing. Maybe the salsa music comes on, you start doing the salsa dance. Dancing in a way that is not offensive, because I've noticed that some women, they can dance, but then they'll do an offensive type of dance. Like they'll just bend over, face down, ass up when it's not that sort of setting. So for some women, a part of their feminine privilege is knowing when there is a time and a place. When's the best time to do XYZ type of dance. Another aspect of feminine privilege is like playful teasing. So some women, they don't know how to do this. They don't know how to tease in a way that's playful. They tease in a way that's very serious. Like they will straight up call somebody ugly, call someone a bum, say that their body looks bad, say that their outfit looks bad. That's not playful teasing. That's like straight up negging. So I think not being intuitive enough to know the difference between playful teasing versus negging, that's another aspect of the women who lack feminine privilege. So you want to start to think about what your flirting style is going to be, kind of what your seduction style is going to be if you choose to use that to your advantage. Because different ethnic groups have different flirting styles, different socioeconomic levels have different flirting styles. So for example, it may be flirtatious in the Black community to start twerking randomly. Maybe that's considered flirtatious. I don't know. But if you go to like a swanky restaurant or something, that's not going to be considered flirtatious in that setting. So I think that for some women, being too monocultural, like switching from monocultural to multicultural, you want to really work on that. So kind of work on your multicultural privilege first before you try to stack all these other privileges on top of it. Feminine privilege, pretty privilege, some form of dating privilege. You have to kind of like build your way up. So this is why you see some women thriving in one area and then struggling in another area. Having a sense of humor, I also consider that to be a part of feminine privilege because it's a part of being playful. And I have noticed that some women who don't have feminine privilege, they literally have no sense of humor. You never see them smiling or laughing. They have resting bitch face. They're constantly angry, or like their only conversation topics are maybe social justice topics or like injustices that are going on in the world, politics. So very controversial talking points all the time. I think that a part of being playful is knowing how to actually be shallow. Talking about lighthearted topics like food or the restaurant or the surroundings or the weather, whatever it is, small talk. Just knowing how to have small talk, knowing how to continue a conversation, asking questions. If you are a good listener, that is another aspect of feminine privilege because if you're an active listener, you're able to ask questions to the people around you and kind of continue the conversation. So that's a form of seduction because you're naturally making that person feel more comfortable with you. You're causing that person to let their guard down. You're kind of breaking the ice. So knowing how to break the ice so that it's not awkward, That's another aspect of feminine privilege. When you think of feminine privilege, are you thinking of a woman who's awkward? No. Anyway, what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.